Okay, we're recording now. I'm going to share my screen. And I'll start the presentation. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. How are you? My name is Darren Lokema. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Compliance and Information Systems here in the Wapner Central School District. On behalf of the District Superintendent, Mr. Jose Carrion, I would like to thank everyone for participating in today's Grade 8 Wapner CSD Reopening Parent Forum discussion. I'll be co-presenting today with our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction, Dr. Michelle Cardwell. Once again, I wanted to note that that audio and video controls for participants is not available, but you will be able to add questions, ask questions, make suggestions in the chat feature of this event. So please do that throughout. Don't wait to the end. By the end, we'll probably have about 15 minutes at the end of this presentation to address any questions that you have. We'll do our best to address them. I think the seventh grade group had some excellent questions that that we weren't ready for, so I suspect some of that might repeat with this group as well, and we'll do our best. If we can't answer it live, we'll definitely make sure to gather the answers for those questions and put it up on a Q&A link on our website. So the purpose of this is to just go through a lot of different Q&A that came out of the parent forum. We want to thank families for responding to our parent forum. Your responses were very much appreciative and very helpful in helping us create this presentation. We are not going to read through the slides. We're just going to go over a lot of the important concepts within the slides. The goal of this presentation is to help you understand some of the decision-making processes that we had to go through and think about and consider when deciding to do remote learning for September, and to provide answers to some of the most commonly asked questions that we received from our survey process, and then obviously provide an opportunity for everyone to ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. And if we can't answer them again, we will make sure to have those answers provided on our website as soon as possible. So just going to start with a few slides, things that we had to consider as we began the process to create our reopening plan. From a teaching and learning perspective, it was noted that by the state of New York that we should see in our plans substantial, we should be planning for substantial daily interaction between teachers and students. That's an important concept and really the only concept I'm going to focus on here in this plan. This is a clickable link up here. You can always read all that on your own. This link will be available when the presentation is available on our website the day after tomorrow. From a social and emotional perspective, we understand that students have been out of school for a very long time. The State of Education Department understands that as well, and they've made it a point to ensure that our plans include meaningful and intentional decisions based upon how we're going to support students emotionally, social and emotional needs when they return to school remotely in September. And ultimately when we do see them in person. So it's not just about their physical health, but also their social and emotional well-being as well. It's hard to think for some students, they probably feel isolated. Students have not been around some of their peers, they have not seen some of their friends, and they have not had the structure of school in quite a long time, and that could be detrimental to social and emotional health. From a special education perspective, and this goes without saying, but we were advised that we were mandated to provide a free and appropriate public education for all students. Now that's the mantra of public education anyway. Of course, we strive to provide an excellent academic experience, but when we talk about all students, we need to take into account the fact that not all students are at the same level, not all students are at their grade level with their peers, and we need to make sure that those students who are not on grade level are getting the appropriate accommodations to help them get back to become on grade level with their peers to the greatest extent possible through the use of accommodations as necessary. Chronic absenteeism. Again, I'm hoping that the presentation itself will answer a number of questions that people will have. Please put questions in the chat. We'll do our best afterwards to answer them after we get through the slide presentation. The attendance taking. The state is saying that schools must adopt a mechanism to collect and report daily teacher-student engagement or attendance. So really just focusing on student attendance. We'll be coming up with a process, and it's going to look different at the elementary level compared to what it is at the secondary. So grade 8 has periods and different courses per period. We anticipate some sort of procedure that'll take into account daily period by period attendance. for teachers to take for all students. That attendance will be reported in our student information system like it would on a normal school day when doing remote learning to some degree. And there'll be a mechanism in place, as there has been similar in the past, that would report any kind of absences home to parents. So if you do end up getting a lot of calls that say your son or daughter is absent today or was absent the day before, depending when the call comes in, and it was not true, please don't be too upset. I'm sure through trial and error, we're going to have a few snafus where we're not collecting attendance properly in this odd environment for us, and we will certainly be able to make the correction to note that if a child is in school, that we will make that correction as necessary. So the next few slides are really just going to speak to what the governor of New York has, and I should say that this presentation, although we call it the grade 8 presentation, is very similar to all the other presentations. The same slides. I know people are talking about that on Facebook. Some people feel that they, thought that there's going to be more customized per grade level. But the reality is we're having grade level meetings because we're so large. And so our online tool can only support so many people being logged on at the same time. So the thought was it'd be better to have more meetings. We're at 15 meetings. It'd be better to have more meetings with the public rather than fewer. So that way no one got excluded because the tool itself wouldn't allow so many people to log in at once. So this is the grade 8 session. There could be more people on here that have students in different grade levels because this is a more convenient time for them to sign on and listen. So I just want to mention that. So the next few slides talk about the most two recent governor's news conferences as they pertain to opening schools. The first one was on July 13th. In that meeting, the governor talked about the idea of if a region is in phase 4, which the entire state of New York currently is, and the daily infection rate remained below a certain percentage, in this case 5%, that we would be able to open our schools. Schools would conversely close if our region's infection rate is greater than 9% using a 7-day average. Thankfully, our infection rate has been hovering at or just below 1% for quite some time. So, we're in a good spot. And then, so at no surprise, on August 7th, the governor came out and said that schools can open across the state, which is great. But it came with a number of caveats that we wanted to share. The link at the top of this page is also clickable. It goes to the recorded session from August 7th, the news conference. You can listen to it. We took out a number of excerpts, a number of quotations out of the presentation, and to help illustrate, some of the things that we had to think about and ponder as we thought about opening school after the governor made his address. Obviously, he goes on to acknowledge that there's a significant level of anxiety and concern between parents and teachers. We all certainly feel that. He goes on to mention that he wants us to do two things. He lists three, he just says two. One is post a remote learning plan, our remote learning plan, and he would like the remote learning plan to address any kind of inequity issues we found during the spring semester this past spring when we did remote learning for all of our students after we had closed. We also need to provide a separate plan for health testing, and as we are learning to some degree that health testing may be something more intensive than just taking temperatures and doing a health screening. We're not 100% sure about that, but you'll see why I say that in just a moment, as well as providing our plan online to do contact tracing in the schools. The governor had asked that all school districts give the public give the parents at least 3 opportunities to have a meeting to talk about the reopening plan. We just talked about the fact that we're going to have 15 and have at least 1 meeting opportunity with teachers and administrators to discuss the concerns with the plan to reopen. So what was interesting during that meeting was when the governor was asked by one of the reporters in the room, what are the schools are supposed to do about students or staff who are asymptomatic? What do you do? How do you keep them from infecting other people? The governor went on to say, thank you for the question, and say, well, that's one of the top 5 questions I'm asked. How do we prevent asymptomatic people from infecting other people in schools, similar to how we got infected in nursing homes, how people got infected in nursing homes? So New York State governor's response was simply, some school districts have a better answer than others. It's up to the local district to come up with a plan. Yes, temperature taking is a concern. Yes, that child who has a temperature. Yes, check that tile. Test that child who has a temperature. But what about asymptomatic spread? How do you detect asymptomatic spread when the only way you can detect asymptomatic spread is when you get sick? But that is and he goes on to say, but that is a very good question, one that the local school districts have to answer. That definitely made us take pause because, we're educators, we're not healthcare professionals. So for us to be left under our own devices to come up with a way to detect asymptomatic spread, that was not something that we were prepared to have to deal with. We spoke, at length about having to do a health screening every day, or plan on doing a health screening every day. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But not necessarily come up with something that we're not even sure if anyone has a solution for at this point. So with that in mind, the governor went on to say, that you need two things to open schools: students and teachers. Students cannot, students you cannot force back, and you don't want to get into a legal battle with the teachers. They cannot teach if they do not feel safe. You cannot order a teacher into a classroom and tell them to teach if they don't feel safe. I'm telling you, there's going to need to be significant discussions. They, the teachers, raise important issues, and they need to be comfortable. So we're a very large district where, this is, and we have a large responsibility to a large number of people: staffs, students, families, etc. Things that happen in our buildings will have ripple effects in the community. Certainly, from this perspective of COVID, if we have any, it's a very consolidated area for people to gather. To give it a sense of how big we actually are, we're looking here is a graph that shows the 13 school districts in our county. The smallest is Weavatuck. Weavatuck is in the most northeastern corner of Dutchess County. It only has 653 students, K to 6, compared to our most recent official state enrollment of 10,645 students, K to 6. There's obviously a substantial difference. We're larger than every district by quite a large margin, including Arlington. Sometimes we're compared in size to Arlington, but in fact, you can see we're considerably larger than them as well. So with that in mind, we definitely have a responsibility to ensure the health and safety of all people who are providing instruction as well as receiving instruction within our school buildings. So in comparison, since we're large and there aren't that many other districts around us in our immediate area, the superintendent wanted to look beyond Dutchess County, and looking at Dutchess County, Orange County, Rockland, Westchester counties, Putnam counties, etc., for school districts who are at least 6,000 students or more. And here is a list of 11 districts. As you can see, the yellow indicates that those 9 districts out of the 11 are going to be starting similar to us with remote online learning first, with a phased-in model after that. Clarkstown and Haverstraw are the only 2 schools at this point. It was, as of yesterday, White Plains was on the list as well, but this morning they changed their mind. As of right now, Clarkstown and Haverstraw are the only 2 districts who are going to be starting the school year with a hybrid model. Now, before we talk about the details of how we're going to split up the cohort when instructing in a hybrid model, I would like to show you our instructional delivery timeline. This will also be a clickable link in the presentation as well. It's going to go to a PDF outside of the presentation that's going to show our phased-in approach to go from remote to hybrid learning across all of our grade levels. So all students K to 6 in the Wappinger Central School District will start on September 10th with remote learning. By the end of September, we will have K to 2 begin the hybrid learning process in our schools, followed by grades 3 to 4 the next week, 5 to 6 the week after that, grades 7 and 8 starting the week of October 19th. So obviously we're talking to an 8th grade group. That is the currently proposed first time 8th grade and 7th grade might be coming for their first week of in-school learning in person under the hybrid model. That, I suppose, is subject to change. We definitely are going to be looking at the end of each week, looking at our processes and procedures, and double checking that our social distancing processes are good, double checking that our communication processes are good, that our health screening processes are good, etc., to make sure that as we expand student access into our buildings, that we are doing so in a manner that is responsible and from a health perspective, sound. So that is what is being proposed currently. Let me just come back into here. And then how we're going to do that in a hybrid model, we are going to be splitting up students into 2 cohorts, A and B. We're going to be dividing those students up by last name. Students whose last name begins with A to K will be cohort A. Students whose last name begins with L to Z will be in cohort B. Excuse me. And any exceptions, we'll make exceptions as necessary because we understand that a simple alphabetical split of households does not take into account students or families' unique needs. Sometimes there's families who have multiple last names underneath one roof. We certainly know that. We know that some people have different daycare needs, etc. We'll do our best to be as flexible as possible to move some of those cohorts around as necessary. Just send an email into your building principal if you need something in particular. Let us know. But essentially, cohort A will come in-person learning every Monday, Tuesday, and do remote learning every Thursday, Friday. All students will do remote learning on Wednesday, while the buildings also get a deep cleaning. Cohort B will be in-person Thursday, Friday as a converse, and then do online learning Mondays and Tuesdays. So with that being said, that is the structure of what our hybrid model will look like. And obviously, we're very eager to see how other schools in our area and in the region and neighboring counties do. We want to get students back into school safely, but as quickly as possible, and hopefully with the end goal of being 100% in person at some point in the near future. But obviously, there's so much that can change in 1 month. It's the 18th of August, so by the 18th of September, we could have a totally different idea as to what will or will not work in schools. So that's what we're proposing. The rest of this presentation will speak to the survey questions that were submitted from the Parent Forum survey regarding these categories. So hopefully this looks familiar to some of you. We sent out a survey. We said within these categories of our plan, what questions might you have? And please put that. Please let us know. And then we took all those questions, hundreds and hundreds of questions, and we took those questions and we consolidated them and collated them together, and we'll hopefully provide answers to some of the most commonly asked questions, starting with teaching and learning. And I'm going to take a pause and have Dr. Michelle Cardwell address the teaching and learning first, and then we'll go on to the other categories after that.
Thank you, Mr. Lokema, and welcome everyone. So as of now, you have heard that all of our students will begin remote learning on September 10th. So the remote learning schedule will consist of both synchronous, which is live instruction, as well as asynchronous learning opportunities. Depending upon the grade level and subject areas, synchronous instruction will have a specific timeline and specific days that a subject will have synchronous learning opportunities. All that information regarding the time students will log in, the amount of time students will be online for live instruction will be provided to you by the schools and the teachers prior to the start of the school year. Teachers will be reaching out to families and to students on login information via the students' emails. And they may even make phone calls. So you will definitely hear within the next few weeks from your child's teacher. Each building will be sending out student schedules. Probably by the end of the month, you will have access to them on the parent portal as well as they become available. When we are in the hybrid model and the students are coming into school 2 days a week and they are home 2 days a week for the remote learning, the students will participate in asynchronous activities that Thursday and Friday. So for example, if a student is scheduled to be in person on Monday and Tuesday in the hybrid model, they will be with their teachers all day. Wednesday will be a day of synchronous and asynchronous online work for all of the students. And then Thursday and Friday will be asynchronous activities that the teacher has prepared in advance for the students. And additional information will be provided to you as we get closer to the phase-in for each particular grade level later on in October. So we are ensuring that we have regular opportunities for students to interact with their classmates and their teachers online. We also know that there may be some scheduling conflicts that may come up with live instruction. And if you do have some conflicts, like multiple children are expected to participate in live instruction at the same time and you don't have enough devices, please reach out to your child's teacher and or the principal, and we will address each of these unique circumstances. So with the grading procedures, we understand that in the spring, many teachers started remote learning without necessarily having all the information to provide formative assessments remotely. This is one of the things that we have been working on. We will finalize the grading procedures for all of the grades in elementary and secondary level. We will make sure that any grading procedure that is adopted will take into consideration students' GPAs and their ranking to make sure that no student is negatively impacted. We are very fortunate that we will be providing our instructional staff with 5 days of professional development at the beginning of the school year. There is much that our staff needs to prepare for in order to make sure that your students are receiving high quality remote instruction, and teachers will begin to implement a hybrid model. They will receive professional development on everything health and safety to make sure that we are adhering to the Department of Health and CDC guidelines, making sure that they are setting up their routines and their expectations. So when students do report to school, we are prepared for them in any circumstances and making sure that we are keeping them as safe as possible. In addition, teaching and learning remotely and through hybrid is something that needs additional professional development. We want to make sure that teachers are comfortable in providing synchronous and asynchronous learning opportunities. We need to make sure that all of the important standards are being addressed and that our students are prepared for academic success. Teachers will be teaching whole group instruction, in many cases small group instruction, through the remote model, through hybrid models. And we will also be integrating social and emotional learning into the curriculum and into daily lessons to make sure that we are supporting the whole child. As of now, the New York State Public High School Athletic Association has indicated that fall sports will begin September 21st. We are waiting for an update to see if that date will stick. As soon as we hear of any additional updates, we will provide that information to families and students. However, as of now, all fall regional and state championship events have been canceled. We value the importance that extracurricular activities have in making sure our students are well-rounded. We understand the importance of socialization and meeting the interest needs of the students. We will look at each of these extracurricular activities and we'll discuss how they should be phased in. Some of them can be held remotely, some of them may be held in person, but we will discuss each of these activities and the appropriateness of having them either conducted in person when we do go to an in-person model, and or if they will be held virtually. For now, concerts and theater productions are tentatively not going to be held the first semester. A decision to allow for concerts and theater productions to be held in the second semester will be made sometime in January. There will be music, band, chorus, and orchestra. There were many questions on this. The schools are prepared to offer these courses remotely while we are still remote. Our music teachers will be providing synchronous and asynchronous learning opportunities for students. They have been preparing and they are ready. When students do come to school, we will make sure that appropriate social distancing guidelines are followed. They will be facing in the same direction. They will not share instruments or stands. They will have specific places that they will be required to sit, all to make sure that we are keeping students safe. Physical education is also something that we have received a lot of questions on. As of now, we are not planning on having our students change for PE. However, that can definitely change as we get closer to October. We will make sure that when possible, students are outside for physical education. When it is not possible, students will maintain appropriate social distancing guidelines and have appropriate activities for PE when held indoors. All of the necessary cleaning and health and safety guidelines will be followed when students are outside and or using any equipment and or physical education supplies. And Darren, I'm going to turn this over to you now to discuss the rest of the information.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. The next category was child nutrition. Students can bring their lunch to school. I think that the question of cafeterias, if you guys remember as 7th grade parents, the cafeterias in both Waukesha Junior High and Van Wyck Junior High get very crowded in a lunch period. They're not very large rooms for cafeteria serving. So we're going to have to figure out what it looks like to have lunch in those spaces and what the building principals will come up with in terms of being able to provide enough adequate space, whether it's going to be eaten in a classroom or something like that. But kids can bring their own lunch to school if necessary. We have to make sure we're taking into account any students who have a food allergy. What are we doing with those students who might not be able to be around some of the foods that are being eaten in a closed space? So things to be considered. We know that, we're aware of that, and we need to work with that building principals on that. The menus themselves will be very limited. If you're eating lunch from the cafeteria kitchen, there will only be one hot or one cold breakfast and lunch option per day. There'll be no and it'll be all served in a grab and go fashion, but there'll be no snacks or novelty items like ice cream or anything like that that the students will be able to purchase. Milk will be the only offering for beverage. If for some reason your child cannot have milk, soy milk will be the only other available option, but it'll have to be prearranged with our food service department if you want that available in school for your child. For days when students are not in school and are doing remote learning, certainly on Wednesdays, but any day, including the opposite day that they're not in person for hybrid, the district has a responsibility and will maintain that responsibility to provide grab and go breakfast and lunches for students who are eligible as free and reduced lunch eligibility. Offers them. So it's just like we did in the spring. Students who qualified for free or reduced lunch, they were able to get curbside grab and go pickup. We will provide information to those families, to all families really, about where the grab and go locations are. Families who do not qualify for free or reduced lunch are certainly welcome to stop by and purchase a lunch if they wish to on any given day. Communication, family, and community engagement section of the survey posed a variety of different types of questions. So here are 4 bullets that outline the most commonly asked ones. There will be, the schedules will be available in Parent Portal. I think Michelle touched upon that. By the end of August, once the schedules are available, you'll be notified like you normally would, phone, email, text, etc., that they're there and ready for you to review. There'll be another Chromebook request form, or it actually went out this morning around 9:30. I think I sent it out. That will be for families to request an additional device if they need to borrow one. Our supplies are extremely low. We still have all the devices loaned out from the spring. Our device count is very low. What we have left, we are willing to loan out, of course, to support our families. The request went out at 9:30. I think we have almost 900 requests, and we're going to just go through them as best we can and come up with a time to have those devices be picked up. We'll be working with the building. This question came up in the 7th grade meeting too, in terms of any kind of orientation or tours or anything like that. It's a little bit different. You guys are familiar with the school unless you're a new family, but we're going to work on doing any kind of online meet and greet opportunities as necessary. I know that we'll have daily synchronous learning opportunities provided by our teachers, but if necessary, we'll add some for parents and students throughout the month of September. And the other question was, will survey results from the parent forum be posted on our website? Yes, they will once the survey is closed, which will probably be a little bit later this week. Health and safety, there's a number of questions that came up with that in this section, a number of different categories. Our ventilation system will be opened up a little bit more, normally draw in 10% of fresh air from outside at any given time. Our facilities department will increase that fresh air intake to 20 to 30%, so long as the weather stays seasonably comfortable. If it gets too cold out there, obviously that will compete with our ability to heat the building, but we will pay attention to that as the weather and the seasons progress. We'll have a higher frequency of cleaning of restrooms throughout the day. We're going to have to hire more staff to accomplish this. General cleaning, Wednesdays will be deep cleaning day. There'll be a weekend day that's deep cleaning day to get ready for Monday. The district did buy disinfecting machines, which will be used on buses as well as all of our buildings. These machines spray a mist of disinfectant on all surfaces. Cleaning between class periods. The junior high is very tricky. The high school is very, very tricky on how are we going to clean, when students are moving from one class to another. We're, especially at the high school, and the junior high students are in teams to some degree. There's a little bit of uniformity there, but not, it's not perfect. But, one person has suggested, well, maybe we have the students clean the desk and the surface that they sit at every time that the class periods change. But at this point in time, we're not able to purchase enough product for us to even do that. We don't normally condone students cleaning their own and touching cleaning materials, but even if we wanted to, we couldn't. So we're in a little bit of a wait and see kind of game with that to make sure we understand how we're going to clean classrooms in between class periods. But obviously, certain periods, certain classes might lend themselves to moving teachers around. I don't know how beneficial that'll be, knowing that that when you're at the junior high school level, you're definitely going between science rooms and band rooms and technology rooms and family consumer science rooms and et cetera. There's so many different things and different types of rooms that you can't just simply teach those curriculum without the equipment and the facilities around you. So that will be a challenge. Contact tracing, we talked about this a little bit. The Dutchess County Department of Behavioral and Community Health is working with all of our county districts to come up with a unified plan for contact tracing. That is a good thing. We want to see that. We want to see what that plan looks like, and once that plan is available, it's one of the components that the governor wants to see on our website. Once that plan is available, we will be certainly posting that on our website for that. Asymptomatic cases, we're hoping to hear more about that. We're not sure what the process is the expected of us. I mean, obviously the governor said what he said, but we need to figure that out. As far as symptomatic cases go, we do have protocols outlined in our district plan. We'll follow those. Students will get isolated. They'll be picked up by their families. The students will then have to take some sort of a deep dive into understanding what the possible exposure risks are and do our contact tracing and figure out who does or doesn't have to quarantine or self-isolate for however given amount of time. We will be asking anyone during in-person instruction days to do a daily health screening for staff and students. This will be done via an online application called Easy Screen. Easy Screen's been working with schools for a while. They do concussion protocol screening for student athletes, so they're just basically going to adapt their tool for daily COVID-19 health screenings. It looks pretty straightforward and simple. As we roll that out, we will be able to share those extra details with you and what that will look like. Hand sanitizing station, in addition, other risk mitigation factors. Hand sanitizing stations will be available in every hallway of every school. Masks will be available for everyone who needs one throughout the day. We're talking about if they soil it, lose it, break it, just don't bring one. We'll have them. Locks installed on water fountains, the bubblers, the button that makes the little fountain of water go. We're going to put a lock on top of that. Students will still be able to use the bottle fillers within those appliances, though. So they'll be able to have access to water just in a more of a touchless fashion. We will keep windows open to the greatest extent possible. We have to install extra soap dispensers in our restrooms. Believe it or not, students do rip them off the wall, so we do have to do our best to add more in there. We're going to disable hand dryers in the restrooms because they are. We're being told that will blow around germs. Nursing staff will have extra PPE. Kitchen serving lines will have, and greeter desks will have these Lexon shields, which is like plexiglass, but not the fireproof, the kind that can catch fire. Ventilation system monitoring will be ongoing. You kind of talked about that. We're definitely going to try and get student lanyards and photo IDs at the high school level, and we'll talk to the building principals at the junior high level and see if that's something that they want to consider as well. And we're going to remove any soft surfaces like rugs or soft fabric chairs that are hard to clean as well. Social distancing, from a social distancing perspective, we have classrooms that range in sizes from 600 square feet to 1,100 square feet. So depends on when the buildings and the design of classrooms from when our buildings were first built run the gamut. My Wapager Junior High certainly doesn't look anything like Van Wyck Junior High, and et cetera and so forth in terms of classroom space and everything. So we have to do our best to make sure that we understand how many kids can truly fit in every classroom. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to take the entire square footage of each classroom, subtract out any square footage taken up by furnishings or areas needed for teachers to teach, and then divide the remaining space by 44 square feet per person. That will allow individuals to have 3 feet of personal space in addition to their 6-foot perimeter of social distance space as they're seated at their desks. Obviously, we'll have to include enough space for teachers and any other adults in the room as well. This rule gets expanded slightly to be 12 feet of social distancing in all directions when individuals are participating in activities like chorus classes or playing wind instruments or doing any kind of aerobic activity that would result in heavy breathing. I'm just going to take a quick pause. You guys are still typing in questions. That is fantastic. Keep them coming. Once this is over, we'll try and hit those questions up as many as we can get to before the end of our session. Overall classes will be reduced to accommodate all of the safety parameters needed with social distancing. It's going to be tricky. We're going to ask that teachers and staff wear masks just about all the time to the greatest extent possible. Obviously, some breaks are going to have to be given, and students will not be able to eat while wearing a mask at the same time. So we're going to have to figure out what exactly that looks like in the junior high schedule. It's a little bit easier to manage, I think, maybe the elementary schedule, but it really depends on how they're managing the cafeteria time. Social emotional learning, there's a lot of questions about that, and these bullets kind of basically address it. We're going to be providing additional training. We're going to buy, we have staff that can support student needs. We're going to get those staff extra training. We're going to purchase curriculum that is related to social emotional learning. We're going to provide workshops for families to address common concerns that families have about their students. And we'll have the support of community-based mental health providers as necessary to assist families when needed, etc. So a lot of stuff needs to be done, especially from a training perspective and a curriculum perspective. Special education, I am not going to cover this in great detail. And I know that this is a very, 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 very important topic, but we are planning to have, I believe, 2 parent forums focusing on special education scheduled for, the official schedule is not out, but we're looking at Thursday and or Monday. So we might have a Thursday morning or midday, and then a Monday, early evening type of forum time slot. Has not quite been addressed yet, but clearly, there's a lot of work to be done. We have not done, we haven't had a number of referrals or initial assessments to the committees of special education in quite some time. So we're going to hit the ground running. We have to be able to identify what students are behind their peers academically and determine whether or not those students have learning needs, or is it just a matter of they haven't had enough exposure to the curriculum, or it just this whole 6-month hiatus of in-class learning has really had a detriment on a number of students, I'm sure. And so we need to make sure that we're identifying who those students are and what really is the proper supports necessary to ensure that they're getting the accommodations they need to be to be able to demonstrate on peer on grade level peer comparisons in terms of performance academically or whatever we have to do to get students to get to that point. So we also have to be ready to write our IEP goals, our individual education plan goals, to be able to pivot between in-person and remote instruction as well. We did have some decent experience with, I'm going to try and go a little faster, decent experience with our high school summer school program. We have a 9 to 12 summer school program every year. It was 100% online this year. It actually went pretty well, I guess, is what I've been told. And that our extended school year program, which is a academic summer school for students with special needs, that went 100% online. And there was a number of best practices that were learned during this process that are going to be brought into everyday instruction for in our remote learning process. We obviously know that there are students who maybe are not able to do any kind of remote learning. Those students who require more in-person instruction, we're going to do our best to possibly bring them in 4 days a week, but as opposed to 2. I just have to speak with your assistant director for special education and just talk about how those needs can best be addressed through the CSE process and the like. I know there's a lot of questions about that, but again, we're going to have at least two parent forums for that community as well. Students who are eligible to receive ENL services, those are English as a second language, basically, as a new language. Those are another high needs population. We got to make sure that we're addressing their needs as well. And then the needs of all students, whether it be through academic intervention services or our RTI process, which is our response to intervention, really just being able to continue to identify students who are performing academically below grade level as compared to their peers and coming up with it's a hard enough process in the junior high to begin with when school is happening in person. It's really hard to do that kind of academic support for these students when it's remote. But we're going to continue to identify students and provide any kind of academic support that we can, and hopefully getting those students, as much assistance as possible to become more proficient and more in line with their grade level peers as we would normally, using a number of different strategies and push in and pull out type services. Transportation is the last section before we get to your Q&A. So just a few more slides here, and then we'll jump over into the questions that are coming into the chat screen. How are we going to provide ventilation and social distancing on the bus? The State Education Department, as well as the Department of Health, have advised that windows and roof vents should be open whenever weather conditions permit. That's pretty commonsensical. Currently, our buses are going to be routed with only 22 students on it. On a big bus, that's basically one student per seat. This can increase slightly as siblings are allowed to ride together in the same seat, so there might be more students in the bus in that case, but we're hearing a lot from the parent surveys that at least 50% of our parents are going to be transporting their children. So if half the students are scheduled to come into school and half of those students are being transported by their parents, there's a good chance we're only see a quarter of our normal ridership on the bus anyway, which would be within the 22 students in a large vehicle determination. Private and parochial schools, if there's someone on the call with that, I know we have a private and parochial meeting at 5 o'clock. The student transportation will be provided whenever that school is in session. So if you're St. Mary's, St. Columba, Lourdes, maybe Oakwood Friends, whichever happens to be for private and parochial schools, as well as any out-of-district placement schools. If they are open, we're providing busing. We are legally required to do so, and we're certainly happy to do so. Do we have to limit students? I think it means number of students on the bus if they wear masks. Yes, I mean, the Department of Education says social distancing and wearing masks is a must, so we must comply with that. There might be medical reasons why some students can't wear a mask. If that is the case, then we will make sure that that student is further isolated from all the other riders to the best that we can, but require at least 6 feet must be enforced. If there are after-school activities, will there be a late bus? Hopefully we can bring back after-school activities, but obviously, we're in a holding pattern. I know that Michelle talked about the September 21st deadline for athletics. We're not sure if that's going to hold or not. I'm sure that a lot of people are skeptical on whether or not that will. But if there's no after-school activities, obviously there won't be a late bus. If there is a need for a late bus, that'll have to be determined based on how much of the after-school activities actually get phased in. So more to come on that. If you want to drive, the question was, I want to drive my kids to school, but would like to have an option to set them on, to put them on the bus occasionally. Is that possible? Yes, it is. You will have your bus route, you'll have your pickup time and your drop-off location or your pickup location, and you will be, you will have that stop every single day. Whether you use it or not is up to you, but your child will be routed as if they're going to take it. Are students taking school bus transportation getting their temperature screens when they arrive at school? Generally speaking, no. The Education Department guidelines say that the health screening can be done at home. It is almost encouraged to be done at home. But now the governor did say what he did say. And so we're kind of waiting to hear a little bit more back as to whether or not we need to do any kind of specific health screening, COVID screening, whatever that is, in schools. If we drive our students to school, what are the protocol for drop-off and pickup regarding social distancing? Everyone's going to be wearing a mask coming and going to school. Traffic will undoubtedly be an issue. Van Wyck and Wappingers Junior High School have nice drop-off locations to some degree, but there might be extra congestion. It's hard to say. We just ask that you please just give us a little bit of patience when we are watching to see what the traffic patterns are like in the first few days of school. We'll make any kind of adjustments we can to help, but we're not sure what to expect in this particular case. Are there going to be strict consequences for kids who don't follow social distancing or mask wearing rules on the bus? Will there be monitors on the bus to enforce these rules? Unfortunately, there will not be monitors on the bus. We would have to hire at least 150 people, which is very difficult, and that's not going to happen. There are cameras in the bus. We will certainly spot check cameras. I know that's not a great answer, but just to see how our processes are being followed. But also, we're going to rely heavily on the bus drivers to handle matters as they normally would with students who are not doing what they're being asked to do. So if a student decides that, if a bus driver decides that, that the behavior on the bus is something that he can't handle, he will refer that student to the building level administrator, who will then, I'm sure, be calling and talking to our parents as well, and talking about any kind of consequences as necessary. Bus rides, how long will bus rides be? We don't tend to anticipate rides being too much longer than normal. They might be shorter. I mean, we're still doing routing for students, but the buses will be pretty empty. It'll probably be the same route every day, but we're just taking A kids and B kids. So it'll hopefully be a fairly normal transportation route every single day. Okay, that is it for Q&A. So I definitely have at least 15 minutes to answer some questions. So I'm going to get out of the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing as well, and then I'm going to flip over to the document where our three co-facilitators have been diligently documenting questions. 1 second. All right, I'm going to just take some of these questions as we go. If you still have questions, go ahead and paste them into the chat, and we're going to do our best to answer as many as we can. What happens if our child gets sick in school? First question. If our child gets sick in school, or if a child gets sick in school, obviously they're going to have to go to the health office. The health office will have to make a determination as to whether or not this is, some sort of a COVID-related type of illness. I'm sure every abundance of caution will be taken, and any student who presents a fever or anything that's on the list and the long list of possible symptoms, they will be isolated in an isolation room and ask that parents come in and pick up their child as soon as possible. They'll be monitored the entire time in a socially distanced space, and the rest of the protocols are outlined in our opening plan. But basically, there's going to have to be some contact tracing type stuff if it's determined that the child was sick and also COVID positive. Will schools be using lockers? It's a great question. Honestly, I don't think that we have the answer for that. Typically, at the junior high level, students are not allowed to carry around backpacks. I'm not sure how much that'll change in terms of we'll let the building administrators analyze their processes and practices. Because whatever's going to minimize hallway congestion will probably be the best way to go with regards to getting students to and from class. Will they be eating in the cafeteria? I think we covered that. If a child calls out sick, do they have to provide proof of non-COVID illness? All right, so that's a good question. No, it's probably more the other way around. If your child is sick at school, we're going to have to request that you provide additional documentation that allows them to come back. So there's that. Putting my parent hat on, there's probably some advantage to some degree of making sure that your child is COVID-free prior to sending them into school, because if we find that they're sick while they're at school, it's going to take a little longer for us to probably allow them to come back without some sort of documentation from the doctor's office, depending on the type of symptoms that send them home. Are the children staying in the same classroom all day? That's probably very unlikely. But how students are going to go from one class to another throughout the day will be communicated, by the district and the building administrators in the near future. Will teachers? I'm going to do my best to answer these. I'm not going to have an answer for all these questions. Will teachers be reporting to their buildings to remote teach? That's a great question. We are being told by our local BOCES, who basically is the front door to the world for our internet. All of our internet goes up into Poughkeepsie to Dutchess County BOCES, and the front door, the gateway, the firewall, however you want to say it, is to the world is at the BOCES. They're saying that we're going to have capacity issues with the hardware that's up there to allow for every building, every teacher in the county, because it's a shared service, to go through that gateway at the same time under remote learning, because remote learning, the one like we're on right now, takes up a lot of bandwidth, or it's a reasonable amount of bandwidth for every connection. If we had every teacher, 800 teachers multiplied by the amount of bandwidth that each connection takes, we definitely would exceed how much we have. And it's not so much a matter of paying for additional service, it's also the hardware that needs to be replaced. And I guess there's a pretty long turnaround on getting the right hardware in place to support additional capacity. So to some extent, yes, some teachers will be able to. Who, when, and how the order would be chosen. We'll have to work with the teachers on that and see if we have such a demand to do so, what the priority would be. Could teachers spray alcohol, Lysol, disinfectant on each desk chair between classes? We're going to work with our facilities department on that question. It's a good question. Kind of alluded to that as well. Can students bring home textbooks? Michelle, I can't remember what you said in the last session about textbooks. Did you want to address something with textbooks?
Yeah, there will be some courses that students will need a textbook, and for courses where materials will be needed, the teachers will work in collaboration with the building principals to set up distribution time. But you will be notified if your child does need to pick up materials.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to keep on going. If another student in the classroom gets sick, do we have to quarantine our children as well? We will provide all the guidance we can on that, and it'll be in accordance with the Department of Health as well. We're anticipating, as part of that contact tracing process, we'll be able to hopefully answer that once we see what that looks like. Will students be monitored to ensure they're wearing masks at all time? Yeah, I mean, to the degree of if they're in class and not wearing a mask, I mean, yes, it's, we ask students not to put their hoods up, but they put their hoods up, so we ask, and so if we ask students to keep their masks up, but they pull their mask down, it's going to be a constant battle, I'm sure. Hopefully students take it seriously, and we're gonna go through this trial by error, I'm sure. Our preparations being made for more traffic at pickup and drop off. We're anticipating it being bad, and there's only so much resources we can get in terms of traffic control from local authorities. We'll have to wait and see how things go, and what availability we have from our community resources that can help us with that. Is there a traffic pattern being created? Again, we're not knowing exactly what the traffic is going to look like. It'll be a wait and see. Where will students wait if they're at pickup? The buildings will identify that as they do normally. I know that the process might be a little bit cumbersome initially. Will we discuss? Well, I think we did. Will teachers be expected to teach remotely from the classroom? All right, we covered that. Will students be following a regimented schedule with a break for lunch while remote learning, just as they would in school? Possibly. Different grade levels, different subjects. We're going to have different processes. Again, we are going to have to take daily attendance, so there's going to have to be a process there. And as Dr. Cardwell had mentioned, that we need to make sure that we're not creating conflicts. So we can't be scheduling students with math and English at the same exact time to be checking in. So we'll have to come up with what that looks like. But that's certainly a concept that we're talking about. For post-secondary schools, will there be a remote equivalent of a Bell schedule? I think we just talked about that. Why were Zoom meetings and instruction not taking place between teachers and students in the spring? Will be mandated in fall? Already the state has said we need to have more substantial teacher-student interactions on our remote learning. So we're working on that as well to have more experiences. Now, not all some classes lend themselves better to live instruction than others, but we will work with that. What are the main advantages, opportunities of leadership season being all remote during September that can change on or about October 1? Does being all remote during September allow the leadership time to develop more details to the plan template that was submitted? Essentially, yes. Yes, it does, and hopefully learning lessons learned from other schools in the area as well. Will hybrid be all day or half day sessions? It's a good question. The hybrid schedule is currently scheduled to be all day. But it's not inconceivable that things could change. Again, a month from now, September 18th, life might look a little bit different than August 18th. Will classes follow a bell schedule? Oh, answered that. If schools start to phase in on hybrid model, is there an option to stay fully remote learning? I think I touched upon that. Yes, you'll be able to do fully remote learning. We're going to talk about doing one marking period at a time. So if you decide to stay fully remote, I believe we cannot force students to come to school, but still must provide some sort of education. What that education would look like would really depend on how many people are coming to school versus how many kids are going to be staying home. But we would try and take those requests one marking period at a time, and then give the option to continue that at the end of that next marking period. If schools start to phase in on the hybrid model, is there an option? Same question. Are students going to be divided up differently this year and switch from previous teams in order to even out the schedule to develop the cohorts? We got to have the students fit in the classes as per the social distancing guidelines we talked about. So we're going to get the kids to school. Then once they're in school, we got to make sure they fit in their classrooms. I know that the administrators at both junior highs are working very hard at looking at the schedule for that. When in-class learning starts, will school times be extended or regular school time? Well, we're going to be looking at regular school time. Band for students, we talked about that. Will the in-person instruction be live? We talked about that. Will in-person instruction be live? If the students are in person, they'll be in front of a live teacher. Will classes follow a bell schedule during remote learning? We talked about that. With the remote model, how will you address lab activities for students in regions in earth science? The state says they're giving us flexibility with lab hours and lab time. They haven't really, there's certain things that'll lend themselves, that some things just need to lend themselves to in-person instruction. But obviously lab hours do need to count. So I'm sure our director of secondary math and science will be working hard at it, identifying, along with his peers and local districts, will be identifying ways in which we can satisfy those lab hours. Are students going to be divided up differently this year, switch from previous teams in order to even, okay, answer that. Who do you contact to change a student's cohort? So household members attend on the same day. Please contact your building principal. Is Van White going to have a jazz ensemble this year? I think that was sort of addressed. How can you set up social distancing on the school buses? It's tricky. 22 on a bus. It's not technically 6 feet apart. We're wearing masks. We're doing our best. If you had to truly socially distance on a bus, you might not be able to fit more than 7 or 10 kids on a bus. So we're going to do our best with that. Will students have to be tested for COVID before starting? No, that is not a mandate that I've heard of. What happens if a child is COVID positive and they have a sibling in another grade? How will that be handled? That's a great question. I think it's going to be a case-by-case basis, but we'll have to act quickly once we find out about it. We'll acknowledge that. COVID tests take about 3 weeks to send results. If so, students got sick, he or she stay home for 3 weeks. Now, there's different guidelines in that. You can look at our plan on the testing piece. Look at our plan online. It definitely doesn't say 3 weeks. Will special education have a separate meeting? Yes, I mentioned that. Is it correct to have 504? Is it correct that 504 and IEP students carry over for remote learning as well, meaning extended time for work, etc.? I'm going to let any questions about the CSE process and what's written as goals or accommodations in a 504 or IEP be handled by that particular parent session. Will students be logging into their classroom during synchronous learning? During logging into their classroom during synchronous learning. Synchronous is live, so yeah, the only way that they'll be logging into whatever means the teacher asks them to log in. If it's Google Classroom, fine, but it'll probably have to be some sort of Zoom call as well. My children are listed as hybrid for Thursday, Friday. What is the instructional plan for Monday, Tuesday? I think Dr. Cardwell did allude to that. Will teachers be expected to teach remotely from their classrooms? We talked about that. Will you be discussing specifics about what remote learning will actually look like in 8th grade? That question came up already. If the full school year represents remote learning in September and hybrid remainder of the year, what assurances is the district providing that all curriculum topics will be completely covered, including AP and other advanced classes? That is tricky. AP was very helpful. The College Board was very helpful in the spring at providing online resources and live instruction from AP teachers all over the country. I don't know if they're going to be planning something similar. If we hear anything about that, we'll certainly let you know. How will watching recording videos from teachers engage students on virtual days? We know the pitfalls of remote learning. We know that there's no substitute for in-person learning. We're going to do our best to provide the best opportunities and learning experiences that we can. Will students be logging into classroom lessons on the remote learning days in the hybrid model? We talked about that. They should still be part of the classroom even though they're at home. We talked about that. Will teachers be required to teach from school building to avoid distractions? And we talked about that. In the hybrid model, assigning teachers to groups A and B seems feasible. What about group C, full remote students? Does the district have enough teachers to accommodate full remote students? It really depends on how many people we're talking about, how many students decide to stay home, how many decide to come in. That is an unknown at the moment. Why can't teachers move and students stay in the same room? In some cases they can. I'm sure. So we'll have to just look at that and see to minimize movement. But again, the secondary schedule is a lot different than the than elementary. And yes, there's teams at the junior high. So we'll just let the building principals try and work around that. That survey does not allow for the request of a hotspot. Okay, if you have a need for a hotspot and you want to fill out the Chromebook request form, just in the second to last question, I think it talks about there's an open-ended question about maybe the number of students that you have in your household who have a device or something like that. Just put in there, I need a hotspot. Is Easy Screen an app that is used by WCSD? No, not yet. No, it has not been used yet. Okay, I think that was actually the last question, and I only went 1 minute over. I'm going to just go back to the screen. Mr. Morgan, that question only allows for numerical answers. Any field above it that is an open-ended short answer question, just put in there you need a hotspot. Actually, I think you emailed me. I already responded to it. That's fine. Michelle, do you have anything that you need to add to this?
Just that there may be some answers that were provided that some of you may seem vague. Please understand that you will be getting more detailed information on the synchronous and asynchronous learning times from your classroom teachers as we get closer to the beginning of the school year. The specifics really depend upon the subjects and the grade level. So more detailed information will be provided to you prior to the start of school. Also, I can't recall if I mentioned, but there will be parent workshops that are being scheduled to help support any families with any of our virtual resources and or tools that the students will be using. And they will probably begin within the next week or so.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Yeah, so I know we didn't answer all the questions perfectly. I know that there's a lot of great questions there that need to be answered, and we will be providing those answers as soon as we can online. And we want to thank everyone for their time. I know that and I'm going to go through the chat before I leave here as well. I know that there's a lot of commentary in there, and it's excellent feedback, and we really appreciate it. So I'm going to stop recording and wish everyone a happy rest of your day. And thank you so much for your time.